So, let's begin with the second in the series of panel discussion on reimaging entrepreneurship in post-COVID era, challenges and opportunities, reboot, reform, research. On behalf of the IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our participants, dignitaries, and our highly esteemed panelists for sparing their valuable time for this interaction with the members of IMC. As we begin, may I request Mr. Sanjay Mehta, Deputy Director General, IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to present the welcome address. Mr. Mehta is having some internet connectivity failure and hence he is going to speak through my phone, so kindly hear him out. Sir, over to you.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, all the participants, our esteemed speakers. My apology first for not being able to be on the line. My internet connection just snapped off. I was there on the line, but then it snapped off. Welcome to all to this third session of the online series of discussion on the new normal in post-COVID-19, reimagining entrepreneurship in post-COVID area, challenges and opportunity. This we are organizing with Million Minds and Center for Knowledge Sovereignty. Thank you, Mr. Sanjay Chakravarti of Million Mind for joining this in this endeavor, and to Vinit Ji of Center for Knowledge Sovereignty to come together, and the support from Invest India, Startup India, and Maharashtra Innovation Society. These we consider as a very important, particularly in this challenging time, and when the government vision is on Atmanirbhar Bharat and on vocal for local, and there are some paradigm shifts in global supply chain. After realizing the pandemic, the companies are now trying to diversify and already have diversified many of them to new geographies. And this is the time for startups to think about in the areas of the global supply chain. And this discussion is going to be on those, how can Indian startup ecosystem seize the opportunity arising from potential realignment of global supply chain. Thank you all for joining, and we have a very esteemed panel of speakers with us. I would like to specially thank them for sparing their valuable time. Mr. Subramani Mankombo of Swarajya Magazine, thank you for joining, sir. Dr. Arpita Mukherjee, ICR ER of New Delhi, thank you, madam. Thank you, doctor, for joining this for this session and giving your time to this. Mr. Sijo Varghese, Maharashtra State Innovation Center, with whom we are already working very closely. Mr. Astha Grover of Invest India, Mr. Karthik Reddy of Bloom Ventures, Mission Director, Atal Innovation, and Ramanathan of Mission Additional Secretary, Niti Aayog. Thank you all for spending your valuable time. And without taking much of your time, I welcome you once again and hand over to Selvi to proceed further. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mehta. Without much ado, let's begin with the second panel discussion in this series on how can Indian startup ecosystem seize the opportunity arising from potential realignment of global supply lines or chains. To initiate the discussion, I welcome our moderator of the panel, Ms. Astha Grover, AVP and Head, Startup India Hub, Invest India. Ms. Grover is in charge for driving the vision of the Startup Initiative to promote sustainable economic growth, help all ecosystem stakeholders, and generate large-scale employment opportunities. Her team, Startup India Hub, serves as a single point of contact for the entire startup ecosystem and enables exchange of knowledge and provides access to market and funding. She leads the ecosystem activation piece by working with various government departments, Fortune 500 companies and incubators to help pilot initiatives with startups through open innovation challenges, accelerator models, market access, and centers of excellence. She is also responsible for internationalization of startups in Asia Pacific, Europe, and US. Over to you, Ms. Grover. I'll just unmute you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you for putting together this esteemed panel today. It is my pleasure to be hosting this panel on how the Indian startup ecosystem can seize the opportunities arising from the realignment of global supply chains. Before I jump to the panelists to know their thoughts, let me provide some context to this conversation today. Just jumping back to from where it all started. Keith Oliver was a British consultant. He was famous for coining the term supply chain and supply chain management. I was actually reading an article that mentioned a story about him recently. There was a moment back in 1978 when a light bulb went off when he was working at Booz Allen Hamilton Consultant for a unit of Philips. Philips was back then and still is a Dutch electronics giant trying to compete globally. That time, Japan was arising as the economic power in Asia that worried Western companies. Oliver discovered that the components of this Philips television traveled at an average speed of 30,000 miles, hopscotching the globe from one stop of production to the next before actually arriving in an American or European living room. Oliver then pitched his idea of an integrated inventory management. Eyes in the Philips boardroom, of course, gazed at him. But when he ad-libbed describing the chain of supply to uniform a fragmented organization, a new theory of how to run a company had brand and a science of managing global manufacturing was born. Jump ahead to 2020 and supply chains have gone from back office obscurity to political scapegoat because they've exposed the economies to shock beyond the borders. Today we have realized that the affected regions that are a heart of the many global supply chains, this hard information is lacking, concerns are mounting over depleting stock, and companies fear that they may not be able to meet contractual obligations on time. As per World Bank, the pandemic has taken a hit on the global economy, which is expected to shrink by 5.2% in 2020. But the fall in industrial production for some countries is also the potential opportunities for others. Today, the idea of this session is to see how we can take opportunities from realignment of this global supply and value chain and make it more meaningful for all the entrepreneurs who are listening to this. Without much ado, let me jump to my first question to the Mission Director of Atal Innovation Mission at Niti Aayog, Mr. Ramanan Ramanathan. It's a pleasure to have you on board, sir, and we've been working very closely on multiple initiatives, but what I'd like to understand from you is what has been the impact of this realignment and how can startups transform their supply chain into an intelligent digital ecosystem to seize this big opportunity? Mr. Ramanan, over to you.
So please unmute yourselves. I'm asking you to unmute. Just click on unmute. Just click on unmute. Oh, I think his internet connectivity.
No problem. So while he, joins us back, let us get a little more perspective on.
He's unmuted. He's unmuted.
Mr. Ramanan.
Thank you, Asta, and good evening to all the people who have logged onto the call, esteemed panelists, as well as dignitaries who are hooked onto this particular very interesting session of how do we reimagine in a world which has been disrupted, where the supply chains have been disrupted, where a simple virus has created lockdowns in countries, where many lives as well as livelihoods have been lost, as well as we are still in the grips of how we're going to continue solving this problem, and beyond, how are we going to live in a post-COVID-19 world. As most of you are aware, I am right now associated with Atal Innovation Mission, a flagship initiative of the Government of India, to be able to promote innovation, entrepreneurship across the length and breadth of our country and create an ecosystem of innovation so that thousands of potential young innovators can bloom and blossom and realize their full potential. And never a time like this time has been the most opportune time for every one of us to be able to see how as the Honorable Prime Minister had in his clarion call on Atmanirbhar Bharat said, how do we leverage the 5 pillars that is going to drive Atmanirbhar Bharat? Because it is in the resolution of those 5 pillars and strengthening them can this particular big problem of not to be disrupted again through supply chain management, through lockdowns, through viruses, through climate change disasters, or through any such potential disaster, including wars or any other problems that may happen in our planet. How do we ensure that we live in a world where we can anticipate, we can prepare ourselves, and we can face it without any disturbance to the existing lives of many people? And I think the first very important thing is in this disruption of supply chains and in the reimagining of a post-COVID-19 world, it is very important for us to focus on leveraging the demographic dividend that we have in our country. It is the envy of the country. It's the envy of many a country in the world. We have more than 65% of our country under 35 years old, and we have 1.3 billion people whose hopes are riding on the 150 million young students who are going to be entering into the workplace. We also have a country which is having more than 715 districts, out of which 115 are aspirational districts, which are still at the bottom of the pyramid in terms of access to basic healthcare, basic education, drinking water, clean drinking water and management, waste management, sanitation, and so on, affordable housing. We are also having only 8 tier 1 cities, and most of the country flocks to the 8 tier 1 cities. So you have a tremendous problem of urban migration that can happen anytime and is happening as we speak. We are also having more than 4,000 towns and cities which are yet to be developed. We have 600,000 villages. So in a country like India, this problem of supply chain management and to be able to come up with very effective solutions in order to be able to address that is so very important. And that is why initiatives such as Startup India, Invest India, the Atal Innovation Mission, and all the other innovation and entrepreneurship initiatives that can enable our young population to become job creators rather than job seekers, and that we create thousands of hubs of innovation and job creation so that we can address the supply chain problem. As the Honorable Prime Minister said, the second pillar on which we have to build Atmanirbhar Bharat is the pillar of infrastructure. And the pillar of infrastructure means not only should the physical infrastructure be improved across our 600,000 villages, access to basic facilities, whether it be electricity, whether it be roads, transportation, and all of that. We need to ensure that the physical infrastructure needs are met so that anybody in any part of the country is able to not only access basic services that are so essential for their lives and livelihoods, but are also able to create a vibrant environment where you can have local job innovation, local community innovation, and thrive. And that means not just the focus on physical infrastructure, but the digital infrastructure and the digital highways. Because without setting up all these digital highways, without enabling end-to-end connectivity, whether you are in a tribal, coastal, hilly district, how do you ensure that using digital systems, you are able to optimize the supply chain? How do you ensure that you have not only just in time, but just in need systems which are going to enable storage, which is going to enable warehousing, which is going to enable the distribution, which is going to enable access, and which is going to enable marketing of your products and services to the other end of the globe? Because that is where we are having a problem today. We are having problems where, because of national lockdowns, we are not getting basic products and services which we are dependent upon in other countries. And therefore, having a supply chain which is reliable, which leverages both the physical as well as the digital infrastructure, and building digital India is so very important, as the Honorable Prime Minister said. The third pillar we talked about in resolving this problem is the problem of technology, leveraging technology. Technology has become affordable, accessible, available, and advanced. So there is a great opportunity now for innovators, entrepreneurs to use this affordable, accessible, and available technology, the cloud services, the internet, to be able to not only build very sophisticated supply chains in a hub and spoke manner. You see, the problem is when you are having a few warehouses, when you're having a few companies who are offering a few products, and then you have a vast country like India with 1.3 billion people to be catered, it's not possible. You need to have a hub and spoke distribution capability, a storage capability, a warehouse management capability, as well as an inventory management capability, so that you know at any point in time, just in need. So if a particular village or a set of villages or a set of districts around a particular state are having a gap in their supply chain, how do we quickly fix that rather than having to depend on some exterior intervention or some long distance intervention? And therefore, it is impossible. It is very important for us to address the fourth pillar that he mentioned, and that is the pillar of economic demand. We are a country with 1.3 billion people, so we have huge demand. We have demand not only from our cities in the urban areas, but we have demand from the 600,000 villages that are there. So if you want to fulfill that demand, this is a unique opportunity for us to be able to create entrepreneurs, to be able to stimulate innovation, leveraging the pillars of technology as well as the pillars of demographic dividend that we have and a fast growing economy that we have. We can put them all together and be able to fulfill that demand. And finally, the pillar of socio-economic growth. It is very important. If when you look at the supply chain management and the issues related to that, you need to ensure that there is social innovation as much as there is economic growth. We have to bridge the digital divide and the economic divide that is existing in our country and across the world. And India can play a stellar role in providing leading innovation and entrepreneurship because they fulfill the needs of our country. And in the process, when you're solving the problem for 1.3 billion people, you also solve the problem for more than 7 billion people on this planet. Now, in this particular scenario, the 3 points that this particular seminar is focusing on: how do you reboot, how do you rebound, and what do you do in terms of research? These are the 3 major aspects. And in all of this, the government is very, very keen to ensure that we are able to support all of these 3 aspects in terms of the entrepreneurship development and the innovation opportunities in our country. When we talk of reboot, we are looking at a watershed moment in our history, in the history of the country and the history of the world, where the dependency on startups to be able to solve the problem of supply chain, digital transformations, hub and spoke innovation, just in need and just in time fulfilling of the supply needs, all of this is possible, and we need to ensure that that happens through pivoting to modern technology. The pivoting of their existing solutions to the needs of the moment is a great opportunity. And that was evidenced actually when we launched a search for COVID-19 solutions recently, along with Startup India, Invest India, DST, DBT, Atal Innovation Mission. We said, can we get preventive, assistive, and curative solutions, as well as solutions for a post-COVID-19 world from the community? And what we got more than 1,500 solutions from the startup community. And suddenly the corporates also woke up to the fact that here is a powerhouse of talent and innovation of talent that we should be tapping, assisting, and supporting. And therefore, we have now identified out of these 1,500 solutions, more than close to 86 to 100 solutions, which are now being actively supported by corporates, by the states, by the governments, by the local governments, as well as by central government. The second thing is the rebound. The rebound is the resurrection of the economy that is required in order for us to be able to rebound from this current situation. We have been an economy growing at 6 to 8%, one of the fastest growing economies of the world. How do we ensure now, because of the COVID-19, where there is a depression in our economic growth, how do we ensure that we rebound? And for that, the government has introduced a 20 lakh crore resurrection economy package, but that requires us not to just be in a situation where we are doling out money, but we are actually creating opportunities for leveraging this enablement through funding and financial support for creating industry, for creating a nation of job creators. And so our focus has been, how do you boost it through the various loans, the mechanisms, the MSME credits that we are offering for the MSME community, which forms 70% of the formal and informal economy. And finally, research. This is a very important point because so far the research focus on research and development by the private sector has been minimal, I would say. In any other advanced economy, we have more than 70% of research and development funded by private sector. In India, we have 70% of the research and development being funded by the government. Now, that is good that we are funding so much from the government, but it is very important for a private sector players to contribute to the research and development, because they have realized the impact of this COVID-19 and the disruptions in the supply chain because of that. And therefore, that is an awakening of the realization that you have to be able to support R&D in a very big way. You have to support the startup ecosystem in a big way if you want yourselves to be able to survive in this post-COVID-19 scenario and then thrive. So all these aspects bring once again back to focus. How are we going to create a vibrant economy which is going to encourage innovation, which is going to encourage entrepreneurship, which is going to leverage the latest of technologies in being able to do that, and which is going to leverage the demographic dividend so that we can solve these problems. And these are all the various initiatives that the government is doing. I'll be happy to take more questions on this later on once the other speakers have been able to share their thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ramanan. I think these insights were very helpful, and you've touched upon some great insights and aspects and strengths of India that could be leveraged, right from urban migration to digital infrastructure to demographic dividend and the need for creating innovation hubs back in tier 2, tier 3 cities as well. On that note, let me come to Mr. Subramani Monkambu, which is the executive editor of Swarajya magazine. So I'd like to know from you, what do you foresee as the new normal in the global supply chain, and how closely would that resemble the pre-COVID world?
Yeah, now the question is, what will the new normal look like? No one is sure how long the crisis is going to last, and what we find on the other side will not look like the normal of the recent years. Now, McKinsey has said that we are going to have the pre-COVID and the new or the next normal. So now the problem is, without a vaccine or an effective treatment, a rapid return to the rising spread of the virus it's a real threat that that we have to return quickly. Now, because of these coronavirus problem, we have had lockdowns, we have had border restrictions, then there have been sudden change in the consumer demands. So, and many industries are dealing with acute slowdown in their operations. And some are really trying to meet the demand in the critical areas, especially for food, household supplies, and paper goods. And then education institutions, we are seeing them coming up with some really innovative ideas, going online, and then they are providing opportunities because the physical classrooms are shut. So I think we are going to see this also more often. And if you see even IT companies like TCS, they are saying that they are going to cut down on their staff who are going to be on their premises. That means they are also going to cut down their cost. What has happened is this has really shown us how cost can be also cut by various companies. So that is also going to get into the management or the cost of how to cut costs and further your profits and meet the demand. Now, there has been a decline in economic activities, especially in the US and Europe. Now, most industries will now need to reactivate their entry supply chains. Then there is a differential scale and timing of the impact of coronavirus. Now, the global supply chains are facing disruptions in multiple geographies. The weakest point in the chain will determine the successes. I mean, what I mean to say is, if you have a weaker point and if it is not able to respond, then that is really going to dictate how we are going to rebound, how we are going to come back. So that is what, if you want to say what sort of impact this will have on, what has happened is across the world, it speeded up the exodus of manufacturing from China. Already there was an exodus of manufacturing from China because of its trade war with the US. Now, India, for example, then Japan, they have all wooing manufacturers. They have come up with various concessions, SOPs to attract manufacturing. And there are two examples I would show. One is Foxconn, which is begun its unit in Chennai. They are investing about $1 billion. They have not exactly said how much, but over the next 3 years, they are going to invest about $1 billion in India, and most probably they'll be using it for producing Apple, because US is putting pressure on Foxconn to shift away Apple manufacturing to other places. That's number one. Then again, HP HP is India's number two. I mean, every third PC sold in India is HP. Now they have started a manufacturing facilities, and more importantly, what a very good trend. I mean, a very important trend we saw last week was that Samsung is going to shift its office facilities from Vietnam to India. That's surprising. We don't know what's really happened, but that is something that we would have to take a look into. These are some of the things that we have been watching after the coronavirus has set in.
Yeah.
And then the other thing what we have seen is no manufacturer now wants to risk the supply chain linked to just one geographical area. We saw that in the case of China, because China was the first one to be affected by coronavirus. And when it was affected, manufacturers had problems with the supply chains, especially I think that is why Japan came up with an incentive asking its own companies to shift their supply chains or the manufacturing bases. And this is happening is there is rapid digitalization and there is increased use of e-commerce. In India, I can give one example in India is Jio. Jio has speeded up setting up its grocery retail stores. Then what is going to happen is the brick and mortar companies will also try to go online. There is going to be a stress more on automation. There's going to be a search for more climate friendly supply chains. Logistics will move from the traditional going for the modern green this thing, and then supply chains might try and realign themselves. They'll go for a sort of circular supply chains rather than go for the linear one that they had been doing till now. And then there'll be increased use of Internet of Things, then artificial intelligence and robotics, AR, VR. So you're going to see a lot of changes.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mukambu, for your comments on this. Very helpful. While you did touch upon, it is difficult to say what the new normal would look like. But I think the entrepreneurs and startups are also trying to find which are the sectors where they can tap on these opportunities and actually transform into their supply chain into an intelligent digital economy to seize this big opportunity. With that note, I'd like to now invite comments from Dr. Arpita Mukherjee, professor at Indian Council for International Economic Relations, to share her views on some sectors where these opportunities could be tapped upon and how can may I also request all the panelists to keep their comments under 5 minutes, and I will prompt you at 4 minutes so that we can take more audience questions towards the end.
Madam Mukherjee's internet connectivity is a bit bad, so she is going to speak without the video. Okay.
Sure.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I did not hear last part of the question. If that can be repeated, please.
Sure, ma'am. So there were two questions. One was, what are the sectors which you feel are more prominent where the startups can leverage these opportunities? And how can startups actually transform the supply chain into a digital ecosystem to seize this opportunity?
Okay. Thank you very much, Asta, and thank you, IMC, for inviting me. There is a global definition of startup, and that definition kind of distinguishes them from a SME. A startup by itself means that it is a component of the fourth industrial revolution. So it has an innovative idea which is a technology-linked innovative idea. So if we go by this global definition of startups, then a startup will be a firm which can be across any sector. So within infrastructure, you can have a startup which is doing something related to tech or a innovative product or services. It can be within the health sector, so you can have a health tech startup. It can be, but opening up a hospital is not a startup. But opening up a research organization is not a startup. But if somebody has an innovative AI and machine learning tools which analyzes data, that would be a startup. So what I wanted to say is that a startup can be across in any area that you want, but there has to be an innovation, a technology associated, possibility of having a patentable product. So that's how you can define a startup, and many startups are in sectors like financial services, in the IT services. Even I was going through the chats and looking into companies asking about questions, startups which came out with ideas about DevOps and better supply chain management, and tracking the supply chain using technologies are definitely a part which helps in manufacturing. Now, when you come to manufacturing and global supply chains, of course, the manufacturing now has become highly fragmented, and initial reasons for locating manufacturing across countries was availability of raw materials and labor. But then with the complexities happened when countries needed to, the host country needed to have some kind of control over their supply chain, some level of automation. And when they wanted this level of automation, they moved into a more automated world of processing. With COVID-19, this will continue, and this will become bigger and bigger because of social distancing. The requirement to move into a country which is labor intensive will no longer be there. You will be trying to be automated, and you will try to have less labor by the consequence of the disease, and actually look into a supply chain reorientation. What happened was when things happened in China, initially we were not much affected by it, neither were companies, and they really thought of India as an alternative destination, because we ranked 15th in the UNCTAD study, which was done in March 2020, among the countries worst affected by Chinese supply chain disruptions, because it was all about Chinese supply chain disruption and global trade getting down. How at that point in time, we were also one of the countries who were projected to have a lower but yet positive growth rate by the IMF, our own RBI, etc. And Vietnam countries like Vietnam ranked much higher as a part of their supply chain disruption. But as we sit today, Indian supply chain, because of the lockdown period, etc., we have gone through a massive slowdown in our GDP, which is now projected to be less than -4.9%. So from positive 1.9, from thinking that we would not be affected by the supply chain, we had other issues that cropped in, including the political and strategic issues, the Ladakh issues, etc., which has really disoriented our supply chain. And we also, as we heard the earlier speakers, we have both a positive side to it and a negative side to it. The positive is, of course, we have a large bulk of engineers and scientific people who have and who leads the startup innovation even in developed countries like the US. The 35% of the startups in the US are Indian startups. However, you will also see that Indian government, the Indian startups are looking into innovation. Government has a startup policy, but where are the gaps? Apart from the gaps of the infrastructure that has already been pointed out, there is a big gap in the policy gap between the Make in India and Startup India. While Make in India tries to attract foreign startups and minds to come to India, Startup India is a very Indian-oriented startup policy. Because India does not have a thing like a startup visa. Today, if you look at the majority of the markets have a startup visa. So if you do not have a startup visa, then you are not encouraging, neither you are talking about startup mobility, because now high-skilled labor mobility in terms of general mobility is going to face opposition, as you have seen in terms of the H-1 visa of the US, because every other country will also become protectionist. So now it is the right time for the Indian government to look into something like a startup visa. Indian startup, while we talk a lot about the startup, our systems of getting patents are very, very cumbersome still. And when you talk about a startup, you talk about AI, machine learning, and software in India is copyright and not patented. And if it is not patented, it is a big problem, and therefore our companies go abroad to get their patents done. So unless we put in a direct system which allows your patenting regime to be aligned with the fourth industrial revolution, you will always find that you are much lower in terms of the patenting. Your private sector is not doing R&D in India, and even if they are doing it, they are not registering their patents in India. Third is that we have not been able to do a guiding policy in terms of managing startups through use of the WTO and other trade agreements. We give incentives and subsidies like export-linked subsidies, which are challenged in the WTO, and we lost the case. We continue to give them, and our industry wants them. However, if you go to every other country, they are using these WTO subsidies to actually put in subsidized technologies and startups for a high growth. Fourth is our indicator of what is a startup. A startup is a high growth firm. Like, in my opinion, Apple and Samsung are not really startups. So if we are able to attract, how many foreign startups are we able to attract? Because when we talk about a level of a company which is in a small scale has a very, very different problem than a company which is at a very, very large scale. So any company at a small scale level, when they are growing and they're entering another market, they do have a problem. And it will be important for us to understand what are the problems faced by the Indian startups in their expansion into the global market, and foreign startups in their expansion into India, and into entering into viable partnerships. We have created a lot of initiatives.
Mr. Mukherjee, I'd like you to wrap up your comments in a minute, please. We'd like to take more questions also.
Yeah, so we have created some joint hubs. It would be interesting to see some innovative startups and ideas growing out of those hubs, and hear how these joint initiatives have resulted in cross-border investment flows and employment. At the end, I must say that our national education policy after a long time has been really innovative in this COVID era, because it talks about making entrepreneurs who can grow into, you know, innovators into the future. So having said that, I think that this is a very important time for the event, and I look forward to replying at the question answer session.
Sure. Thank you, Professor. To assure you from the side of the Startup India, because I had the Startup India team at Invest India, a lot of suggestions that you have mentioned in terms of startup visa, in terms of enabling ease of regulations for foreign startups, that part is already being taken care of. With that, I will come to Mr. Karthik Reddy, co-founder and managing partner at Bloom Ventures. Karthik, I have two questions for you. One is that, you know, over the last few months, we've seen a lot of investments, about $20 billion have been committed by leading multinational corporates like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and the likes, ensuring their trust in the ecosystem. How do you see Indian investors and fund taking opportunities from this? And what is the appetite of Indian investors at the current time of COVID? How is the investment scenario looking like? Once you answer that, there is also an investor related question from the audience. I could probably take that with you after that.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks everyone from IMC, Asta. No, so obviously, I must sort of warn that 20 billion number is mostly one company, right? It's just Jio. And so we shouldn't overplay that number, but we have to give credit to Jio for having sort of signaled to the rest of the world, especially to the west of India, including a lot of the American behemoths, that India's time is coming, right? And has arrived. And I think it's a great proxy for a vote on the Indian ecosystem, with Reliance being almost a indexation of everything that's happening in the startup world. So overnight, they've become the most valuable sort of mega startup in that sense, and historically, done with their own capital. It's a huge indicator of that confidence. Both strategics, I think, sometimes are better indicators of momentum in an environment than simply financial investors, right? They because the strategics have a pulse on the ground. They see what the opportunity is. All these companies which bought into Jio already have a significant presence in India. They make a lot of revenue already in India. And it is a validation for them to be able to buy into the biggest carrier in the country and also sort of expand into more relationships via the Jio platform. It's the beginning of, I think, also the equivalent of what happened in China, where you had 3 or 4 big companies which kind of became the mega platforms, the BAT platform, Baidu, Alibaba, Tencent. And Jio is kind of signaling that shift alongside maybe Amazon and Walmart. It's not as native as a Chinese mix, but we won't be surprised if this is the beginning of that momentum where we are able to create a lot more made homegrown unicorns going forward. So that directional shift then gives everybody confidence that, it's just not the 30 unicorns of today, but probably the target, which was which people started talking about a year ago, 100 unicorns by 2025. Though it sounds like a vanity metric, I think the reality has reached much faster on 2 counts. One, as a lot of my fellow speakers have said, the pandemic has offered a very unique moment for digital infrastructure to allow India to leapfrog on many, many counts. So we might not be able to build all the physical infra that we need in the next 5 years, but digital, I think, will help us overcome some of those gaps. And much like you're seeing Apple and all of these big companies benefit from this in the West, we are going to see the biggest technology companies building in India, startups upward, leverage the need for tech to solve these problems. And I think it's a big wake-up moment for the rest of the country to know that we've sustained momentum despite the pandemic, largely driven by technology being an enabler, right? Whether it's in supply chains, keeping supply chains intact from factory to shop front or from shop front to home. And I think, so it's a seminal moment, I think, for Indian technology. 15 years of hard work, and I think this decade is going to be a boom decade for us. So clearly, by the way, as we speak, I know at least 5 funds which are in the market raising new funds. They're getting significantly more capital from their existing investor base. Clear indications that there is a big voice of support into India venture capital. And then I won't be surprised if a lot more international funds come knocking as well as soon as the planes start flying again across borders. All of these, I mean, the money business is always a trust business, right? Very difficult to do it simply off Zoom calls. So despite that, I think there's been momentum, which is fantastic. And I think it's a matter of time when the markets open up and the borders open up, we'll see a lot more momentum. That's my take. And a lot of my peers have already covered all the hot uptick sectors in the economy. I don't have too much more to add. One thing I would add is remarkably what, when you think about social infrastructure in this country, healthcare, financial services, education, mobility, logistics, things which fundamentally are required to nation build and move the country upward and onward, a lot of it is getting rapidly pushed ahead by the digitization frameworks that are available, right? So 50% of the country is getting taught over a laptop or a mobile phone over the last 6 months. Nobody could have imagined that that would happen for maybe 4 years or 5 years from now, despite how much ever money a venture capitalist throws in. So I think the combination of circumstances, behavior of consumers are always going to say, I'm happy if you give everything at this price point to me at a global quality. And once you start delivering, they'll say, why the hell weren't we doing this before? And I think those shifts are going to become permanent. That's my take on the market.
Thank you, Karthik. That's been very helpful. And we do agree with you that India is painting that picture which we need to show the world that yes, we are ready. And there are few flag bearer companies that are doing that for us. But it's also good to know the sentiment that there are quite a lot of investors that are looking to raise new funds, and some are already trying to deploy the same. So thank you for that reassurance, Karthik. With that, let's move on to the last panelist that we have today, Mr. Sijo Varghese, Manager, Innovation and Startup at Maharashtra State Innovation Society. Sijo, I'd like to know from you what specific measures Maharashtra State Government has taken for the innovators to seize these opportunities. And there's an audience question also directly at you on how can any Indian who has been through, say, a good formal education take the help of startup movement and different state government policies to give back to the society right now?
Yeah, thank you, Asta, and thank you, IMC, for this invite. And it's been a very good panel around, and a lot of discussions happening around over the startup ecosystem and the development and the actions to be taken to boost the startup ecosystem. At the state level, I would say there are a lot of initiatives being carried out before the pre-COVID era and the pre-COVID era as well. And during the COVID also, there was a lot of brainstorming which was being done to understand how do we support the startup ecosystem, because this is the right time, as the previous panelists also have been discussing about the opportunity has come. For example, we were discussing about the industry 4.0 to be 3 to 4 years down the line, but it's actually getting digitized. There is something which is smart manufacturing, smart logistics, which is actually happening through the digitalization. And there is a kind of blessing in disguise, I would say, due to this pandemic, for the startups to actually bring out a lot of solutions, tech-driven solutions. So as the state's nodal agency, we had been working and trying to understand what is the exact set of support which probably we can offer to the startups. One of them, just as we were discussing, we had an understanding about all these early market, early stage startups which have been working in the social front. They require a lot of initial market access, and for them, government is one of the biggest marketplace. And how do we give them some support in terms of giving some market access? And in the past 1 or 2 years also, we have been successfully running this program called as the Startup Week, wherein the government identifies key good startups, at least 24 in number every year, and we work with them closely to give them work orders, give them pilot opportunities, and work with the government. The first thing is giving the startup an opportunity to work with the government. Secondly, the startup, as we know, to get an initial work order just on the basis of trust is very difficult, even in the private sector, and it's even more difficult when it comes to the government. How do we give them this opportunity without any tendering, and giving them pure chance on their technology? How do we give that is basically what we wanted to address, and that is what we are doing through the Maharashtra Startup Week. And this year we just did it last week, and it was a completely virtual program, and with a focus in key sectors like agriculture, healthcare, I would say smart infra, mobility, and all of them put together. Education, skilling, all key sectors which are relevant to the society. And we select 3, I would say, on an average 3 from each sector, and give them pilot opportunities worth 15 lakhs with government bodies. This is one of the flagship events which we are doing, and has been very fruitful even during this post-COVID era, where there has been solutions awaiting from startups which would be required in the government machinery. And once they showcase their fruitful, effective solutions on the government benchmark, probably it is a reference point for them to scale up their projects in the private sector as well. And that we have a strong hold on. That this is one of the boosting things which the startup require in terms of procurement as we talk about. The second couple of things which, as a government, which we try to solve is, there is the industry department have in the past 2 years or so, they have come together and put up a single window platform for not just for budding entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurs at large. The platform is called as Maitri. Maitri being a platform it's a single window platform for departments. Close to 12 departments, issues related to 12 departments can be addressed through this single window platform. And almost 50 plus approvals are taken online through this platform. This is something which the industry department had started with a slow starter, but during the COVID, they understood this is the need of the hour, and they have paced their activities in accelerated their activities, how do you, enable these kind of set of advantages to people who are distant and who are not able to actually physically go to government offices and take permissions and things like that. So there's a digital platform altogether which is made, which is called as Maitri for people who are starting up and required to take some initial permissions for starting up their innovation, so that they can actually focus on their technology front rather than going behind the government requirements. There are a couple of other initiatives also as the state nodal agency which we are planning to bring about. So we have close to 16 incubation centers to whom we are directly supporting with capacity building and with financial support. One of the key things in that is they are more of in tier 2, tier 3 cities, and there have been a lot of people looking for local ecosystems to be developed. And one of our major aims is, to create center of excellences in these local places and make sure there are some, good budding startups getting an opportunity to showcase their talent and actually commercialize their idea stage projects. And that's what we are trying to bring through these incubation centers. And along with that, during the COVID, what we've understood is that there is a lot of manpower which has left cities and gone back to the rural places. So probably this incubation centers might also be, transformed to larger information centers where, skilled laborers can be, created out of this. So basically out of these 16 incubation centers, 11 are university-backed incubation centers. And they have preset courses and things like that, which can be, modified and nurtured as per startup requirements. And there is an attempt to, collaborate the skilling requirements of the startups and, and create that understanding within the incubation center itself, which creates this entire ecosystem being developed really well. That's what is an entire aim for it. Parallelly, there are small work which is being carried out in terms of financial support, which we want to give, but that's, still into discussions because of the, financial problems which we have at the state level in addressing the COVID. But there is a bigger attempt about, trying to support early stage startups in their testing phase, because that is something which will be quite useful for them, addressing solutions, whether it's digital, whether it's like technology, or whether it's product based startup, giving them some assistance in testing and in filing their IP support, not just the financial part of it. Probably in IP, we might also give them an hand-holding in, early tier 2, tier 3 guy who is not in a position to actually understand what is the IP process. We might put up a process in place which will enable him to understand, at least to know in the first place, whether his product is, patentable, or it's something which is just a thought which has come into his mind and someone has already put it into place as an IP. So these capacity building things are also required to, keep the overall ecosystem boosting. And these are a couple of the initiatives which we are, currently working around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sijo, for that. Maharashtra is doing a fantastic job with all the initiatives you mentioned, especially Maitri, and my personal favorite being the direct procurement orders you give during the Maharashtra Startup Week. That's a initiative of the state, and we look forward to more of these best practices being picked up by others. On that note, I'd like to take some questions which have been coming and popping in our chat window, starting with the first question from Mr. Samir Kumar Shah, who wants to know, R&D innovations especially need optimal grants in initial phase, which is very common in USA. If India intends to be an affordable manufacturing hub, especially in healthcare, how do we involve market forces like health insurance sector to promote affordable innovations? They can directly play a role in stabilizing rising healthcare services, which is a necessity. Just checking from the panelists, Karthik, if you'd like to add anything here or comment on making affordable investments and grants being available in more countries, especially at the initial stage?
Not the best person. I think some of them, we've had one or two companies be lucky on this front, where they've been a little ahead of the curve on what Indian grant giving organizations can do for them. And by the way, we were lucky enough to also have Technology Development Board as an early LP when we started off 10 years ago. So there are entities of that nature in India, and more, I think, are being
I just want to add, we do have actually number of initiatives in Atal Innovation Mission and Niti Aayog for this. We launch every year what are known as Atal New India Challenges. And these challenges are launched along with ministries. So we identify, for example, the last Atal New India Challenge that we launched, we had 24 challenges with 5 ministries. One was the Ministry of Health, the other one was Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation, Ministry of Road and Transportation, and Ministry of Agriculture. And the other one was on smart cities. So these challenges, we give up to 1 crore of grant for anyone who has a prototype of an innovation, a ready prototype of an innovation, and the grant is useful for converting it into a commercially deployable product or a market-ready product. The second set of challenges which we are going to launch soon is what is known as ARISE, which is Applied Research and Innovation for Small Enterprises. And this is particularly for early stage startups who have an initial prototype or a research idea, and they want to convert it into a minimum viable prototype that is ready for production. So that is the first phase. We were first giving the second phase, which is you already have a working prototype and you want to convert it into a product. But here we will allow very good research ideas, which are research and development ideas. It's not basic research, but this is R&D, which will want to be converted into a prototype. And so we'll be giving grants for that. Again, here we'll be working with ministries and with the industry to identify these challenges and launch these challenges. And this is one way that the startup communities who are in the early stages, who are in need of grants to be able to complete their prototype idea can avail of. And I think this is going to increase. We are also looking at very active participation along with the private sector, because the private sector knows some of the challenges that they have to solve if they want to become more export oriented, less import dependent, and so on. So that's the next phase which we are going to launch. But I think there is a tremendous need for public sector and private sector to participate in all of this, than just leave it to the government and say, please give us, keep on giving us funding so that we can try it out and we can experiment. When there are multiple stakeholders in the system, then there is more interest and therefore there is more fruitful outcomes.
Thank you, Mr. Ramanan. In fact, I was coming to you only because I know Niti has the similar SBRI program. On that note, there's actually one more question from the audience for you, from Mr. Danny Davidson. I'd like to know, how can new entrepreneurs utilize incubation centers funded by Niti Aayog?
So there are multiple ways in which they can do it. In fact, we have now more than 68 incubation centers, and we have close to 1,500 startups now associated with them. The important thing is these incubators, the way we are funding the incubators is very outcome oriented. So every 2 years, they are expected to graduate 25 to 30 startups. Each incubator is supposed to graduate 25 to 30 startups by providing them critical support during the valleys of death, as they call, mentoring, venture capital support, seed funding support, access to labs, hiring strategies, business validation, and so on and so forth. And therefore, any startup which is in need of support from an incubator should approach one of the 68 incubators which are out there. They're all listed on our Atal Innovation Mission website, and give a presentation to them and be able to get integrated as an incubatee. Because once they become an incubatee, then they get a whole lot of access to facilities as well as funding support. But more importantly, they get the access to a huge network now. You see, earlier all our incubators used to be silo incubators, and they were all operating in a vacuum. You had very good incubators in IIT, in the IIT ecosystem, but still you didn't have too much connect with each other. The unique approach that we have been following right now, and which is necessary in our country, is how do you connect them all together and provide a vast network of resources rather than the set of resources that a single incubator or a single university will be able to provide. And that's the big advantage that the startups have by getting associated with incubators.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Ramanan. On that note, we'd like to, move to a question where Mr. Subramani wanted to add. Can I please add an opportunity? He wanted to talk about the opportunities from Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities. Mr. Subramani, over to you now, and if you could also address opportunities in the health segment, if that's your forte, because a lot of questions I see in the audience are from people who are either into the electronics or into the health space.
Yeah, before Subramani answers, sorry, I forgot about one thing, which is, related to the previous question, how can startups associate with the innovation network? We also are setting up Atal community innovation centers in Tier 2, Tier 3 and underserved regions of our country. And any startup which has a solution that can be applied to local communities, supposing it is a tourism solution, or it is a agri-tech solution, or it is a fishing industry solution in the coastal districts and so on, they could use our community innovation centers to pilot and test it and roll it out, and then scale it across multiple innovation centers. Because that's the whole idea. The community innovation centers would be hubs of innovation in rural India and in Tier 2, Tier 3 cities. And that will help startups reach across to these places. Otherwise, normally a startup is stuck up to where it is located and they don't have reach and access to those. So I just thought I will add that as an answer to the previous question also.
Sure. Thank you. Very helpful for the audience. Yeah. Over to you, Mr. Subramani.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. I just wanted to say that COVID-19 is now seen more as an urban phenomenon, because if you see cities like Mumbai, Chennai, Delhi, Calcutta, they are the ones which are mainly affected. And if you see the rural India, I was talking to one of an entrepreneur in Chhattisgarh. He was saying that even now people in Chhattisgarh roam around. There's no physical distancing. They don't use their masks. And we are also seeing from the data that we are getting in the sales of vehicles and other things that rural India is doing well. What we have not looked at, or we were looking at people asking for opportunities or investments from other places. Now the government came up with three key reforms in the agriculture sector, and that was something that was never expected. And I would say that this was one of the blessings in disguise during this COVID times. One was that the government has given freedom to the farmer to sell wherever he can. Earlier, he could sell only to the mandi nearby. Now he's got the freedom to sell anywhere across the country. The second one is that they have done away with the stock limit under the Essential Commodities Act. So that is another one where anyone can buy the stock without any limit. And the third one is that contract farming. Now, what we have seen is there are people from Singapore and UK who are looking to help the rural sector in investments in the agriculture sector. And if I'm right, Maharashtra had begun a sort of scheme for building infrastructure at village levels with a World Bank project. But I think right now there's a slack in that. But what I'm saying is there are a lot of opportunities for startups outside Tier 1 and Tier 2 cities, where they can look at setting up warehouses at village level itself, or helping a couple of villages. Then they can set up cold chains. Then they can look at infrastructure solutions. They can look at transport solutions, technology solutions. They can set up electronic platforms or another type of sales platform for farmers to sell their produce. They can become aggregators. There are so many options. Then they can also, come up with value addition of farm products, because that is one, because at least 20% of what is being harvested is being lost today. So all that can be done. There are plenty, especially because of this, and this is one of the reasons why people say there are two comments on these agriculture reforms. Number one, somebody is equating with, Ashok Gulati, the former Commission for Agriculture Costs and Prices, as, sees this as equivalent to the 1991 economic reforms. But there are others who say that this is the real ease of doing business. These are sort of opportunities where, startups can look at crop advisory, smart irrigations, farm-oriented services. As I said, aggregators. Then they can also look at leasing models, processing. There are quite a few opportunities. That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you so much for adding insights into these sectors. Very helpful, sir. On that note, I'd like to now pick a question for Professor Mukherjee, if you can hear us. Ma'am, since you were talking about, how the global economies are doing, Mr. Winston Tixeria wants to know that how can the Indian government support more to startups? Do you think elite countries who are a bit advanced in technology like Japan, Korea, and from Europe play a role in Indian startup growth by investing or through strategic partnerships?
I strongly believe that, Indian minds are very good. Okay. So we do have a lot of good skills. In terms of the technology and investment, where we do lack is sometimes in terms of finances, or, startup means that you will keep on trying. Some cases you will succeed, many cases you will fail, yet you have to keep on trying. So therefore, there is a need for a financial infusion into the trial process, whether it is an innovation stage or at the commercialization stage. So a partnership with Japan and developed countries like European Union, of course, helps, and that is something which the government is thinking in the right direction. As you may have read few days ago, we are thinking about having supply chains with Japan, Australia. So a developed country partnerships is definitely going to help. And people like you should actually put it as a part of our trade discussions with the European Union and others. Like the high level trade dialogue should have a discussion on this. Chapters on trade should have a discussion on this. And we really talk about ITES visas, and now we should also move into more startup visas. And now for doing that, when you come to a country like Japan, you see we have taken commitment in 127 professional categories. It does not cover number of areas where startups are. So when we do an agreement review, we need to look into those areas. And I think this is an amazing question, and there is a big role for cross-border collaboration. And your initiative, even with countries like Israel, are excellent. We can do with Israel, even developing countries like Chile, which has become startup hubs, we can work with them.
Sure. Thank you for that insights. I think just to add on to your point, yes, there has been news of Australia and Japan and moving the hubs and creating new supply chain zones. Startup India also has 10 international bridges with countries like Japan, Singapore, Korea, and the likes. The idea is to offer soft landing platform to entrepreneurs from both the nation and avail the opportunities which are hosted by investors and corporates. For example, we are working very closely with Japan and JETRO to provide sector-specific investor pitching opportunities to the Indian entrepreneurs and help them expand, as well as facilitate movement of Japanese entrepreneurs out here. So all the details are available on the website. Just wanted to add that perspective as well. On that note, and in interest of time, I'd like to move on to the closing remarks. And in fact, there's a question from Mr. Will, which says, we all know about 101 weapons, which have now import ban in India. How can we check opportunities in the same? I think it's a beautiful question, which addresses the essence of the discussion very well on how can entrepreneurs reboot, reimagine, and recreate in this new times. On that note, Sijo, I'd like you to share your final thoughts and comments, please. Any last minute tips for entrepreneurs and how can they check opportunities with the current import bans?
Who's this question to?
Mr. Sijo?
Mr. Sijo, I've asked you to unmute. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Sijo, please go ahead.
Yeah. Asa, can you just repeat that once
Yeah,
again?
Sijo
I
just
missed out.
wanted to hear your closing thoughts on last minute tips for entrepreneurs that will help them reboot and reimagine. And there's also a question which says that with all the import bans that are currently out there, what could be the opportunities where entrepreneurs can look at?
Yeah. So just to give a closing remark to all the entrepreneurs, one is that businesses require a lot of trust, and trust is something which doesn't have a shortcut, and also when you see at it, it is something which is there's no secret sauce to it. You have to at the first instance itself, one of the key USPs for our startup week itself is like whenever you're offering your product, even if there is high demand for digitization and technology to take place during this post-COVID, also make sure that the quality of the product is something which can be dependent on, and we don't have to depend on some third party or a different country altogether to import these facilities and technologies. So the quality is an important factor, while the ecosystem is trying to support in all possible ways, but as a technology and as a quality factor, it's very important to startups to inherently build it within your systems to ensure that it is matching to international standards. And, people look into the country as one of the most prominent and promising, places to venture within. Answering, to that last bit of questions, there has been, at the government level also, there has been a lot of emphasis on, capitalizing this import ban, which has been there. I would say for prominent startups who are working in the defense and aerospace department, even the state government has put up a dedicated fund called as the Defense and Aerospace Fund, run by IDBI, and all of them. So there is a lot of support which is the ecosystem and the government is trying to give, to develop such weapons, or I would say defense equipments, which is being put on ban. So I think I would encourage them to put up best foot in and give it the highest quality, wherein the government can have the confidence in investing in them as well. Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Sijo. Karthik, over to you now. What would be your final parting thoughts for entrepreneurs where they could seek opportunities? Can you hear us, Karthik?
Unmute?
Yeah.
No, I've unmuted. Okay. So, so it goes back to some of the ideas I was stating before. I think the bulk of at least internet and technology wave we saw, which was venture funded from my lens in the last 15 years, which is where the VC activity industry picked up a lot, was predominantly driven to yet servicing the top sort of 100 million, 120 million, 150 million customers in this country, right? Or it was, a lot around cross-border software, etc. I think there's a huge opportunity to focus on how you shift the next 500 million, 600 million people who are desirous of the same quality of services, but obviously at a price point which is affordable to them. You can't, and which is the best example of this to Reliance's credit has been Jio, right? Fundamentally crashed data prices, and suddenly India on a per capita basis consumes the most amount of data in the world. And that's a fascinating construct when you can imagine 4 years ago exactly to the month we didn't have a Jio in this country. So I think the game-changing infrastructure is in place. And today, so I asked my driver, what's your kid doing? He said, I left him in the village. And I said, but how is he managing online classes? So I got him a second-hand laptop, right? And so it's the momentum with which this is moving is just fascinating. So the startups need to focus on empowering more Indians to come into the mainstream, economy and enjoy the benefits of technology that were otherwise alien to them, right? For the longest time, if you delivered software to a shop front, it was a desktop solution. Who the hell buys a desktop, right? And even if they would buy one. How do you get 10 people in the shop to operate it? So the mobile phone, I think, has somehow become a passport to competing even more aggressively with the world. right? And it's not because you can manufacture something with a mobile phone, but it just gives you so much power. It's a supercomputer in your pocket, as I've said in a few blogs over the last 4 or 5 years. And suddenly having 500, 700 million supercomputers floating around in the country just gives enormous productive power for this economy, which wasn't otherwise tappable before. Not with a dumb phone, not with a voice connection, right? I think that's the game changer that India has to focus on. So even just fundamentally chasing, as I said, healthcare, education, financial services, media, logistics, mobility, it's huge, huge, huge opportunities. The country is just waiting for better solutions. And of course, applied to places like agri. We funded 3 agri startups in the last 18 months before COVID. And I think it's like a huge upswing for them. So you're attacking new target segments which you otherwise thought were unreachable or unviable at the price points that were historically available. Cost of tech coming down, access, and the readiness of the customer. So you can go to a farmer today and they will, tell you how much milk they delivered and how much milk they're owed for that day's collection digitally today. That's fascinating, right? And so I think that I think is the opportunity. Like very exciting decade ahead.
Thank you, Karthik. I think it's very exciting to see how more and more users are getting digitally empowered and how startups are tapping these opportunities with respect to digitalization. Thank you for sharing the relevant examples as well. On that note, Mr. Subramani would want to know any final closing remarks for you, any opportunities for startups they should focus on?
Like what is happening is today, what COVID has exposed us to is, solutions are on us, or we are compelled to take some drastic action. Nobody thought that, we'll be doing online classes. So what is happening is technology is really overtaking us. So the business thoughts process will have to be, aligned to such a way that what are the possibilities? Because I happen to go through a management book which is in the pipeline. Now it says that you will have to think of your what are the possible threats to your businesses. So what has happened is so far it is not the rivals who have who have gone past you or the particular producer. It's always a new technology. New technology has a lot of innovations, and what startups can do is, one, look at what they can really offer. They'll have to look at their strength. Two, look at their potential customers, and then they can go ahead and work with it. So this can really help, and technology is just growing by leaps and bounds, and we have to be prepared for any eventualities that are going to come up because of technology. We are heading really, places because of technology.
Thank you, Mr. Subramani. Very helpful advice. Dr. Arpita Mukherjee, if you can hear us, what would be your final closing remarks on opportunities for startups during these pandemic times and how they can grow further? Dr. Mukherjee?
Dr. Mukherjee, can you please please unmute. Hello?
Can you repeat the question, because I was not able to hear it?
Sure, ma'am. My question was, what would be your final closing remarks for entrepreneurs to take of the opportunities due to realignment, and how do you see them growing further?
I think the entrepreneurs, there is a growing opportunity for our tech entrepreneurs, because India has been a tech driver in the world, and startups are mostly based on software and products which we can participate in. However, to do so, we have to be more targeted about, about what are our strengths. How do we have to be less dependent on government, and, we need to be more structured. We have to have wonderful product and services, because we are competing in the global world, and we need to really use our innovation to have something which is a useful product and services. And then we need to also take together our issues. We need to align our issues, prioritize our issues, go back at the center and state level, because at 2 levels they are working on the startups. Give a correct idea about our needs and requirements, and I think that's the way forward. If we provide a laundry list of issues and problems and help, that that is not going to work because India does not have money to fund those initiatives. We are not China in terms of ability to fund the initiative or the government support to the sectors. So we need to have a more innovative way forward through a collaborative model, through a global collaborative model.
Sure. I think with the whole digital infrastructure being created, we are already moving towards closer ties with all Western worlds and all Asian countries as well. And digitization would help us further bridge this gap as well. Thank you for those remarks, Professor Mukherjee. On that note, coming to the final closing remarks from the last panelist, Dr. Ramanan. Wanted to know from you your final thoughts for entrepreneurs, and this one specific question from Mr. Samir Kumar Shah for you: the need of global IT platform to promote innovations, especially in healthcare, to promote lock and key theory. Ramanan, sir, if you could.
Yeah. So first I'll respond to the question, is there a need for a global IT platform to promote innovations, especially in healthcare? I think there is a need for many platforms, not just one platform, because you're not going to have one platform which is going to be a single platform where you're going to have all the healthcare solutions being promoted and so on. It has to happen at multiple levels. It's a large country, many companies, many states, and there may be different type of solutions for different categories which need to be factored. But I think one thing is sure, that we do need IT platforms, and there is no problem in any IT platform going global because of the internet and because of the web. So I believe that more and more such platforms are in order. In fact, if you look at the MyGov platform today in India, or the Startup India platform, these are indeed global platforms where anybody could come across, get details about startups from Startup India, get details about investment opportunities and projects from Invest India, and they can get information about various innovations that are happening at a grassroots level from MyGov. So I think need for these platforms is very, very necessary. In terms of the question about, is there an opportunity for the young startups today to be able to address, and what opportunities are there? I'm very positive and very optimistic. I by nature am an optimist, but as they say, an optimist is always sees the glass half full. And I believe that there is a tremendous opportunity for young innovators, budding startups to make the most out of this particular situation. I believe we are at a watershed moment in our history, in the history of our country, with a tremendous convergence of growing economy, demographic dividend, as well as affordable, accessible, and available technology. We are also a country of 1 billion people with 1 million challenges, and 1 million challenges means 1 million opportunities for us to be able to address. We have shown to the world the power of Indian intellectual capability. We have grown $180 billion IT/ITS industry out of purely the educational system and emphasis that our country has had over the last several years. Of course, our educational system focused on rote learning mindsets, which has had its dividend, which has paid its dividend. But today we are fortunate to have now tremendous knowledge capital in our country, tremendous knowledge know-how. We are working for some of the best and most innovative companies of the world. And therefore, there is a huge transfusion of knowledge that is happening between companies all over the world, which are creating world-class products and using Indian IT services and Indian IT intellectual capability. Also remember that our Indian diaspora who have gone abroad and who have accessed an ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship are at the highest levels of achievement and eminence. Sundar Pichai heading Google, Satya Nadella heading Microsoft, Adobe being headed by Shantanu Narayan, several universities being headed by Indian deans. I mean, this is the positive thing that is happening in our country. Now, how do you turn that all around? How do you pivot that? And how do you take it to convert our country into a problem-solving, innovative country? How do we create innovations that are in India, for India, because of the demand that is there? And that becomes a part of the export opportunity that we create. And I think the Bharat App Innovation Challenge that was recently launched by MeitY, MyGov, and Atal Innovation Mission is a classic example of how an import ban, which was being addressed in some manner, I would say, through this challenge, drew a tremendous response. We had more than 1,500 high quality applications, apps, which were out there, and which have been in use, but which have not come to the visibility of the Indian public because of a lack of support, maybe lack of knowledge, a lack of financial and marketing capability. But that's what we have to bring to the table. And when we do that, I'm sure you're going to have world-class solutions coming out from India, world-class apps. That knowledge capital exists, and all the initiatives that we are taking today, whether it is setting up tinkering labs in schools, incubators in universities, community innovation centers across the country, challenges that we are launching for local solutions, and Atmanirbhar Bharat cohort and calls. I mean, this is providing that base, and it is providing that fuel for catalyzing and accelerating innovation to a completely different level. And so I'm very positive, and I think startups should take up this opportunity, grab it with both the hands and run, and you're going to succeed in the race.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ramanan, for your inspiring and optimistic words. Very inspiring. Thank you. With that note, I think we've had a very fruitful session, and different views came around how could startups leverage this opportunity, reboot, reimagine, and research, and how could global linkages in terms of digital infrastructure could be built, and how the investment scenario still looks positive with more and more investors going out for raising new funds. I'd like to now hand over to the IMC team for final closing remarks from their side. Thank you to all the esteemed panelists for being there with us today.
Thank you all, and thank you, Astha. That was a wonderful session, very nicely handled, and almost all the Q&A addressed. So I think all the participants also are satisfied with the way it has gone. Thank you very much to all the panelists and and Astha. As we come to the end of the session, may I request Mr. Saugata Ghosh, Deputy Director General, IMC Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to conclude this session by presenting the vote of thanks. Over to you, Mr. Saugata. Just a minute. Yeah. Please unmute yourselves.
Thank you, Salvi. Before I move into the vote of thanks, I would take this privilege to ask one final question which has been in my mind for some time. I have noticed of late, and since I have got the VC part and the regulator part and the government think tank part on the one platform. So my question is, I think, to everyone out there, you guys can choose who can answer that. The question is, once a startup in India becomes big, we see the tendency of the startup to go abroad and then, reincorporate and get domiciled abroad. Typically, any big startup, whether it's a Paytm or a Flipkart, when they are very, very small, they are happy to be in India. But once they reach a certain scale and a size, they move out of the country and get domiciled in Singapore or some such other foreign location. So the question is, A, what drives that? What is it that the Indian ecosystem is not able to provide that these companies go out of their way and get settled abroad? B, as a consequence of that, what do you see, and do you think this is a good move or a bad move, positive or a negative? And is there any way that we can address this and ensure that the startups actually stay back here, domiciled here, as an Indian incorporated company and not, some Singaporean company or something like that? Anybody?
I'll take the answer because I have to leave for another webinar, but I'll quickly answer this particular question. You see, you cannot restrict a startup and say that you cannot grow. A startup's aspiration is to grow, and they want to grow fast, and they want to grow quickly, and they want to grow before competition eats them up. So they look for opportunities in the local market. I think every startup would look for funding opportunities in the local market. If they're able to get it, I don't see any reason why they would go abroad or they would domicile outside. Secondly, you need to make policies which are constructive and which is making ease of business and ease of startup growth and scale very practical and easy. So there is as much to be done by the government as it has to be done by the industry. I think local industry and large players in the Indian space, large companies which are among the top in the world, they should also see how they can invest in startups and how they can encourage the startup communities so that people don't have to go abroad. It's not that people don't know about opportunities that startups are seeking, nor do I think are the startups lacking in their interest in reaching out to the private sector in India. But somehow, private sector in India has to become a lot more aware and a lot more risk averse, and be able to invest in our Indian startups, quality startups. They don't need, of course, to compromise on quality or expectations from the startup, but it is a combination: government policies, infrastructure, and ecosystem being made available, and at the same time, private sector also playing a role. So I think I would not blame the startups if they go outside. You know, if we are not able to retain them, it is like Indian students going abroad. You know, why would they go abroad? If you have world-class universities in India, why would they go abroad? If you have world-class, so you have to be able to enable that, and the job is as much ours, and not just asking them to be patriotic and stay back and inhibit or limit their own growth. So with that, I'll take leave, but because I have to go for another webinar. But thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to participate.
Thank you, sir.
There's one or two things to add. Even I have to jump off, Saugata. I think the three things. I think, you know, it eventually, even as a capital provider, you're investing to get money back, right? Most startups are heavily funded, and capital providers direct how the business should be built, because you need the capital back. It's not about, oh, I'm not a patriotic Indian and I'm an entrepreneur sitting in Chennai or Bangalore and I don't want to build in India, right? So if there was Indian capital markets allowed for easy listings of not, you know, loss-making companies, none of these problems would exist. If all your exit sources are overseas, and Indian buyers, both public market and private market, pay crappy values for the asset, why should he be in India? Same point that he made, right? So essentially, if somebody's put in 10 years of effort and you're getting 3 times the price overseas, I will cater to the overseas capital, right? Eventually, I started with that same Deshbhakt attitude. 100% of my $20 million fund was from India. After that, not more than $20 million has ever been from India. So I went to 60 million, 100 million. It's all foreign money, right? I am betrothed to that money. So in Indian ventures funded 95% by overseas money. So the money, capital is a very powerful tool in this entire, capital decides what happens, right? Not the entrepreneur, right? You don't have the capital, don't come to the table. Let the capital and the entrepreneur figure out what is right for the business. But fundamentally, there are businesses which have to chase overseas revenue. And when you are chasing that overseas revenue, you can claim that, yes, they will buy from an Indian company. I think that moment will come. We did it in Infosys, TCS, etc. In product companies, we haven't yet achieved that. It's a matter of time where there is an Indian SaaS company registered in Gurgaon, Bangalore, or Bombay, and then sells to the best companies in the world. But they prefer a Delaware company sending them the bill. Okay? So before you can get to that subsidiary of that, they'll say, first you deliver the unicorn, profitable, list it, then talk. And we haven't done that. So it's a cycle. I think in another 5-7 years, your question will be self-answered. Where people will say, we're proud to build from India and ship to the world. And it's okay having a subsidiary overseas as opposed to the parent overseas. And to the extent people can, they will move. To the extent they can't and shouldn't, they're staying here. That your point is a myth. I don't think there are that many companies overseas, as you're saying. Amongst the unicorns, at least more than 50% are Indian domicile. And they will list in the Indian markets if they eventually have to break out. I don't think it's as dire as you made it out to be. That said, I would love to see all 100% of my winners be India-centric. I have to jump off as well. I'm late, so thank you
so much.
If you may, can I add to this, because we just did a survey of the Indian startups, and we can give you 2 or 3 points here which we have not discussed. One is the point related to data. While there is a need for data privacy and security and consumer protection, which nobody can deny, what India is going to do with its data is very, very, it's very, very gray area, and that is where the startups are, or a tech company is very, very worried about, and they don't know really what the policy is going to carve itself out as. Secondly, for example, the RBI policy on rigid data localization. So whether it will be data mirroring, data localization, sharing of data with a trust, is all of that is something which is being debated in a COVID-19 world, where a health data, which is very, very sensitive, is now being given to private sector to analyze. The second point that I would like to bring to your notice is that many of these countries, like for example, Singapore has a regulatory sandbox. So you are able to have a regulation which allows you to twist and turn certain innovation. Like for example, in Indian roads, where are you going to try a driverless car, or regulatory kind of a regulatory fintech product? So those are some of the determinants of, and you may need to actually develop some zones or certain facilities where the startup would be able to try out their innovation within a constrained environment, like the high technology zones model that many countries are implementing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Anybody would, Sijo or Mr. Subramani, anybody would like to comment? Sijo?
It's okay, I suppose.
Yeah,
If there's
Sijo.
no
I think,
further comments, then
yeah.
okay, Sijo, carry on.
No, I think it's well said by Ramanan and or by Karthik. It sums it up well, I would say. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Astha, you have any comments for it, or shall I move on to my vote of thanks? Because I see we have already overshot by about 10-12 minutes. All right, I'll do that. With this, we come to the end of the today's webinar session. I thank all the speakers and the panelists and the moderators for a fantastic session. Special thanks to Astha for not only coming in moderating, but also providing our logo support for the Startup India event that you see in the background and all our marketing material. I would like to also thank Dr. Mukherjee for bringing in our unique perspective of an economist into these sessions. Normally, we do not have an economist in these similar sessions. We thought we'll try it out, and it has worked out very well. Karthik, naturally, because he's part of the ecosystem and his views were very, very helpful. Dr. Raman, because obviously, again, he's coming from the government think tank, which puts out most of the policies related to startups and the ecosystem and the economy. So his participation, I'm grateful for. Sijo for Maharashtra state government participation, their inputs, and also thanks for the logo support, Sijo. And Mr. Subramani Monkambu for his perspective, and also from the media's perspective, a new media house, if I may. I mean, they do not, Swaraj is one of those digital online media companies which have come up very well over the last few years. So I thought that would also add a great deal of value. So thank you all the participants. Thank you all the speakers. Thank you, Selvi, our host for the evening. And we will again catch you next week, same time, Friday, for a second last session, which is funding for the next frontier technology and disruptive innovation. How will it take shape in the new normal post-COVID? So I hope to see you over there. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, friends. Thank you for your cooperation, interest, and active participation. So see you next week, same time, same place. Thank you.
Selvi, can we just answer to that last question? They don't need to register again.
Yeah. Yeah, they don't. No, but they'll need the Zoom details, right?
Yeah, that is, we send it out. Once you register, then you start getting it all across.
Yes,
all
yes, yes.
Thank
So
you.
no need to register again. No need to register again. You will be getting the Zoom invites for the next lectures.
Thank you.